The year is 1994, and director Steve James brings us a powerful documentary that follows the lives of two Chicago teenagers, William Gates and Arthur Agee, as they pursue dreams of becoming professional basketball players. In what appears to be a film about basketball, the film actually hits us with a tale about class, race, education, and opportunity in America. Over the 5 years of the film's spans, the camera captures the boys' struggles with injuries, academic pressure, family hardship, and the crushing weight of expectation placed on young athletes. This isn't a sports fairy tale. It's a film about how talent alone is never enough when systems are stacked against you. Moments of hope are balanced with setbacks, making the story feel honest and deeply human. The result is an emotionally resonant portrait of ambition, resilience, and the cost of chasing the unachievable. This week on Back to the Balcony, we cover 1994's Hoop Dreams. Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert, two titans of cinematic review. Sometimes right, sometimes wrong, but always captivating. Your hosts Antonio of the Cult-Worthy Cinema Podcast and Justin Henson of the Movie Wire are here to take you back to the balcony. And this week we have a very special guest host, our number one fan, our number one commenter on YouTube, and all-around cheerleader. We got Mikey BURGETT of the Screen Nerds podcast. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being our guest host.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Antonio. It is a pleasure. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with you and to get to talk about one of my favorite films of all time.
I mean, well, what's exciting for me is the fact that I had never watched this movie because I'm not a basketball guy. I know of it. I know how important it is. We were talking offline about the Sundance Film Festival. I went to Sundance the year this came out. The whole city was abuzz about Hoop Dreams. And then when it became a theatrical release, it became all a buzz again too. Like everyone was talking about Hoop Dreams, especially our critics, Gene and Roger. But it's just something I never pursued. And so I was really excited that you brought this to the show because it finally gave me a chance to see it. And after I watched it, I was like, how have I slept on this for 32 years, man? 32 years, this movie was available at Blockbuster. It was available on streaming. It was on HBO through the Criterion channel, so I was able to watch it. And it was great. And I couldn't believe that, 2 hours and 52 minutes of movie just flew by and how absorbed I would be in this story of these two guys. I didn't even know that it was about two guys. I thought it was just about kids playing hoops in the inner city. I had no idea it was about the struggle and the focus of these two characters of different ages going through the paces with the dream of being NBA All-Stars, NBA players. And I just absolutely loved it. So thank you so much for bringing it.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you have now been indoctrinated into the Hoop Dreams universe. This is a film, having grown up in the 80s and 90s as a huge basketball fan, this film was one of those ones that I was just super excited to see because of just that connection with basketball and film. And I didn't get to see it in the theater. I would have loved to have seen it in the theater, but where I was growing up, it wasn't playing anywhere near me. So I had to wait a whole year or so until I could rent it at Blockbuster. And as soon as I got to, I immediately put it in the VCR and watched it and fell in love with it because of the fact that it's just this real and honest film. Like these documentarians, they took the time and spent 5 years with Arthur and with William as they grew up trying to pursue that dream of being in the NBA and the hardships that went along with that, the ups and downs, the struggles, the triumphs, everything that went along with that. And knowing that story, it was one that really just resonated with me. And I was super excited to see it even back then. And then even just revisiting it again, being able to watch it, thankfully, on HBO Max to revisit it again. It's just a phenomenal film. And like you said in the intro, it's not just a basketball film. It's a human film, and it's about real people. And these documentarians did a great job of capturing that.
Well, and it's an interesting thing for me because I'm not a huge documentary guy, and it's I think the thing that you have to remember is that there are so many different facets of documentary filmmaking. There's the cinematic aspect of something like this, or there's like the Ken Burns 12-hour, things that you would watch on PBS. Now, I like those, and I'll sit all the way through those. But I've never really put a whole lot of weight on the idea of like a cinematic documentary that's 2, maybe 3 hours. I feel like that's more of a TV thing for me. So I really can't think of any documentaries that I've seen on the big screen with the exception of maybe a couple Michael Moore movies at the Sundance Film Festival, which, again, don't thrill me. So I never really put it on my priority to go see a documentary on the big screen. But at the same time, there is something to be said about, even though this is shot on video and it's, 4:3, it's not a big cinematic widescreen movie. The immersive experience of the storytelling of this movie, I think, is what really makes it so engrossing, that you actually feel like you are just a part of this documentary crew, or that you're actually in the room as these guys are struggling with their ACT tests or struggling with tuition or seeing family trauma. And dude, I looked up what happened to the families years after this thing was made. Tragedy, right? Absolute tragedy in some of these situations. So I really wish I would have seen this on the big screen as a kid, because there is something our critics say later on in their reviews, and that is the fact that kids would enjoy this movie because it does essentially let you follow a young teenager and then a little older one, but you get invested in the stakes. You get invested in the wins and the losses, because everyone has wins and losses, and you're seeing them on a different level. And I think the thing that I liked about this the most is that when it opens up, it says the Cabrini Green Housing Project, Chicago, which everyone knows is like one of like the worst places to grow up. Candyman lives there, right? So even if you're a horror film addict, Candyman lives there. That's just how bad the reputation of Cabrini Green is. So my first thought was like, oh, this is going to be about gangs and drugs and crack. It's going to be like those HBO Life on the Street documentaries from the early 90s. And it's not. Like, there's echoes and shadows of it and the people around it, but they really focus on these two characters and their family support of them. So that was a pleasant surprise too, is that it wasn't the predictable inner city struggle kind of documentary. It was about the development of talent and not having opportunities that other people have. And I think that's what made me really attach myself, is that it wasn't the stereotypical housing project bad, gangs bad kind of movie. It allowed you to grow with these characters and not feel judgmental about what the movie could be about.
Yeah, and one of the things too, and you have to remember like time and place of when this was filmed. This was late 80s, early 90s. So this was kind of before the real world reality TV genre that really kind of took off at that period. This was just something that was kind of unique. Like when they were pitching the film, the filmmakers, they were going to only do like a 30-minute thing on like them as eighth graders. But like once they got to know the Agee family and the Gates family, like that's when they decided, we really need to spend more time with them. And so they got to spend 5 years with them and see them grow up and see not just them, but the families too, and really get to know the mothers and the fathers and the brothers and sisters, and get to see the communities that they're in. And they don't sugarcoat anything, but they also don't make it, like you said, it be, all about the hard, gang drug thing that it could have went. Like they really kind of focused on these two families, and yeah, it's hard where they're at, and it's not an easy road that these two go through, but you are invested in them and you're invested in their story because it's real, and it's not like a sugarcoat kind of thing, and it's not like hardened. It's just real, and it's really unique in how things are now. I don't think you could really make this film now, because you have so many people with their GoPros and their iPhones that could film stuff now, that it wouldn't just have that real resonance to it that I feel like that this film, in the time and place that it was made, that it has in that.
You make a good point there, because that's something else I was going to bring up, is that this generation, I'd say any generation after 2000, so let's say Gen Z, millennials, and below, there is this kind of now almost like a preternatural instinct to always be on, right? Because we always assume that we are on camera, there's a phone pointed at us, there's a GoPro pointed at us. I think society's adapted to the idea that we are pretty much being broadcast live 24 hours a day, even if we don't know it. Ring cameras, security cameras, right? But when this was made, we're still in a very analog time where people really don't feel comfortable in front of a camera. They're not ready to be on all the time, especially lower income houses and families like this, where they didn't really have access to that kind of technology. And so being able to capture that kind of story and that kind of environment, it seems more real and natural, because the idea of being broadcasted, whether on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok, isn't a thing. So the genuine response and the genuine reactions of things that happen don't feel fake. Because we are now in this society of reality TV, I feel like emotions are so diluted or over exaggerated. Even when I see documentaries or things these days, it's like people are almost camera ready. They know how to act in front of a camera. Like, look at us. We're on webcams right now talking about a podcast, and we don't feel weird about it. But back in the 80s and 90s, I think that's when we really saw some real stories, like the HBO Life on the Streets. There's an old documentary from the early 80s, I think it's called Streetwise. That one was crazy, about homeless people in New York or Chicago. So I feel that we are losing the genuine feel of what the real world looks like through the eyes of a documentarian, at least in the United States, because everyone is so camera ready and ready to be on and ready to be broadcast. People make money doing dances on camera. Like, it's a different world that we live in. So I agree with you. A story like this would be so much harder to tell in this day and age.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too of why it would be harder to tell this particular story is because we know so much about high school talent, even middle school talent,
Right.
because of the proliferation of websites such as 24/7 and On3, these recruiting sites that will look at these talent way before they even get to high school, that we already know their names, we know, where they are and everything. And even like, we have these documentaries now, like there's so many like sports documentaries that are either on Netflix or Prime Video or Apple or wherever it is. There's just a proliferation of them, whereas this was unique in its, it's about these two guys that outside of Chicago, most people probably wouldn't have known who they were, because they weren't that big a name at that point. And whereas now, if they were that type of person and they were that talented, everybody would know who they were. Like Cooper Flagg, the number one pick in the NBA draft this past year, everybody knew who Cooper Flagg was before he even went to Duke, because he was just so talented and everything. And so I think that also what makes this film so unique is that you got these two guys that you didn't really know about, but because the filmmakers let you know, hey, these are two guys that have talent, and they grow up in a target-rich environment of basketball in Chicago, which develops such stars as Isaiah Thomas, which we see in the film. Even that, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have that success of even making it to a 4-year school and succeeding and going to the NBA.
Well, and the other thing about this experience is I realized that I'm a bad documentary watcher, in the sense where I knew this was 2 hours and 52 minutes, and I was so engrossed with the story and seeing what was going to happen with these guys. Do you realize how easy it could have been for me to just pick up my phone and Google what happens to William and Arthur and just like spoil the ending? I had to like fight myself several times because I wanted to know it so bad, even though I wanted to watch this documentary and have it expose the story and just roll itself out to me. But at the same time, the impatience I was of like, what happened to these guys that I almost Googled it? That's not a way to enjoy a documentary. But again, that speaks to what you were saying earlier, that like it's hard to make a movie like this and invest in audience because they can cheat now. We have cheat codes. We can literally Google the ending. We can literally Google to see like what happened, where are they now 20 minutes into the movie. Matt Damon was on a podcast a few weeks ago talking about, I think it was Joe Rogan, and I don't watch the Joe Rogan show, but it was all over TikTok, where Netflix really is talking about how they have to repeat the plot points 4 or 5 times in the movie because they know that people are doing what's called second screen viewing. Yeah, they're watching the movie, quote unquote, but they're also on their phone and not paying attention. So the screenwriters have to dumb down the story so people can like catch up to what's going on. And it's killing the whole kind of structure and plot devices of movies these days because they are catering to an audience that isn't paying attention. I was almost victim to that because I really wanted to know what happened to these guys and not put in the work. And it's so rewarding to put in the work. So maybe that is another reason why it's like, I feel like documentaries these days, especially like true crime ones, they're almost like shock value because they have to keep the audience enthralled with something shocking, with something gory, with something that is, I don't know, let's say unpolitically correct. And it's very apparent that people don't care. Maybe they do, but studios don't care about telling human stories like this anymore, right? And that is where this is such a rarity for a guy that doesn't care about basketball at all, because I was always the shortest kid and I never got to play, that I'm invested in these guys. And it could have been anything. It could have been tennis. It could have been hockey, whatever. It was the story of these guys. And that is why I really, really love this movie so much.
Yeah, and the fact that they were able to get it down to really 3 hours is impressive because the fact that they had
250 hours of footage they shot for this.
Yeah, 250 hours over 5 years, and that they were able to whittle it down to just under 3 hours. I mean, there's a reason why they got nominated for Best Editing at the Oscars that year, is because that is just a ridiculous amount of editing that they got to. And it's a wonder of like what footage they didn't put in there. I would love to have seen like the footage that was left on the cutting room floor, but the fact of what they got in there is very powerful. Like there's not really a scene in the film that doesn't really have an impact. Like everything is there for a reason, and it sticks with you throughout the film. And it's a film that, yeah, it runs 3 hours, but it doesn't feel like it's 3 hours because of the way that the pacing works and the story, and more importantly, the people draw you in and you get compelled into wanting to know more and to hear their story and to see what's going to happen with them.
The fact that they are able to, I mean, I didn't like run a shot clock on how much time they devoted to each of these guys, but the movie feels very evenly dispersed between the two stories. Like I feel like they don't outweigh one character's time and struggles more than the others. And they even have time to introduce, let's say, secondary characters like Arthur's mom and his dad, who disappears and goes to jail for crack and comes back and becomes a big part of it. And the suspense of a film where if this was, let's say, a scripted narrative movie, the dad character would almost like be expected to be the bad guy. Like, okay, I'm going to exploit my son's talent for my own personal means and blah, blah, blah. You're almost expecting that because it trains the muscle memory of your brain as a cinema appreciator that could happen, but it doesn't. And even if it did in real life, that's not the most important part of the story. If I had to have one, let's say, complaint about the movie, I got two, and I think they're so nitpicky, man. The one is like the narration is so like subtle and subdued that I almost felt like I didn't know when the narration started or ended because the voice wasn't that intriguing or enthralling. But I don't know if that's a bad thing, because maybe if it was too strong or too narrative, it would take away from the feel of the movie. The fact that it does almost feel like an AI voice these days, just a very monotone guy speaking very softly, that actually gives more weight to these characters and doesn't take away from it. Like, at least it's not a celebrity with a British accent, right? That wouldn't fit. And then, I don't know, I feel like the climax was just a little bit anticlimactic, but again, that is training our muscle memory of our brain to expect a big finale, to not be satisfied with that. Like, to realize that sometimes real life and real stories don't have a climactic ending. The ship doesn't blow up. They don't save the day. Sometimes life just goes on, and just those little wins to you are actually big wins for these characters, and you have to appreciate that place where you are in life, where it's like, okay, I can't recognize how important that is to these people because that's not my life, but now I can actually experience what it is to be them and how important that is for them in their life.
Yeah, I think the one thing about the narration, I appreciated the fact that there really isn't a whole lot of it.
Right.
Most of the time that it's there is when it's at games and there needs to be like some context as to what's going on, like how much time's left, what's the situation, and the director kind of like steps in and kind of gives a little nudge as to this is the direction that it's going. And so really he just lets the people speak for themselves. And I think that's one thing too about this film, is that it's not the narrator kind of telling you what's happening. He's just letting the people tell their own story. And so I think that's really, really compelling because it leaves it up to them to tell it, not the narrator. And
Right.
as far as the ending goes, it's like a continuation of the story. It's like we're stopping the film at a certain point, but their lives continue on.
Right.
And so we won't know, as the watcher, what's going to happen. We get kind of like at the end, we get like a title card to explain kind of what immediately happens afterwards. But we see that as far as like them moving on, like they graduated from high school, which for a lot of them in that Chicago city area, they don't necessarily make it to 18. They don't necessarily graduate from high school. They don't necessarily go to college. So the fact that these two guys were able to do that is a huge win. Like that's a huge moment for them, and that we get to see them, take that next step. And so I think for a film that tries to really be as honest and as authentic as it can, I think that's one of the things that really makes this film stand out from not just documentaries, but just films in general.
Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into the critiques of Siskel and Ebert of this film. Now, they actually did this twice. They reviewed the festival screening in like January of that year, and then they went back and they talked about it again when it actually had a theatrical release. And the whole point of their January review was so like they could try and motivate the studios to buy it so it could get a theatrical release. But it's really interesting to hear them talk about a film so excitedly. Like I'm really happy about this because we have had so much negative from them on the show lately. It was good to hear some positive. So this was from the January review.
This weekend at Utah's Sundance Film Festival, a premier showcase for independent films, the movie world will be discovering a very special documentary called Hoop Dreams, which follows two inner-city Chicago youngsters on their quest for basketball stardom. A most ambitious project. The Hoop Dreams production team follows the boys for 5 years, from their freshman year in high school through their freshman year in college. And what a story we get. I'll tell you how good Hoop Dreams is. I couldn't wait until the end of the picture to see what ultimately happens to these kids. We learned that in a series of titles flashed across the screen, but I'm hoping for updates as their lives progress. In a few years, I'd like to see another documentary on them. A documentary on chasing the NBA dream and the often harsh realities along the way. Hoop Dreams will play this week and next at the Sundance Film Festival. I'm sure it's going to be received well there. So let me add my congratulations to those that are going to be earned by director Steve James and photographer Peter Gilbert. They have made a special film.
Boy, they sure have. This is one of the best films about American life that I have ever seen. And for 3 hours, I was just totally absorbed by the story of these two families, really. It's not just the kids, but their families. And we get so many images in the movies of black inner city characters with guns and drugs and gangs. Here are families that are struggling to make it. You don't hear all the 4-letter words or the 12-letter words. You see dinner on the table at night. You see kids getting up before dawn in order to take an hour and a half commute to go to school. You see them trying to study, and then at the same time, you see the way their basketball skills are really manipulated, even at the high school level, before they ever get to college, by people who want to make use of those skills. It's a movie that just raises so many questions and has so many insights.
And on the movie level, these are two characters. I think, no, there are people who, when they hear documentary, they think they'll back off. You're going to find these guys more interesting and fully written in the ways that we're always knocking pictures for being underwritten. Here are two exciting characters.
Let me just suggest one thing to you. We talked about the air up there, and we said, well, kids will like it.
Yeah.
I think kids would like this too, really like it, because this is a real life story about kids.
Well, I think they will too. And I'll tell you, when this kid is shooting his free throws, we know who's shooting them.
Yeah.
And that's terrific.
I think one of the things I have to say about their critique about this movie is, you know, I haven't really covered a lot of documentaries that they've done on the show, but there is something to be said about two pretentious critics who are so judgmental about camera work and direction and acting and writing and plot structures and device, that when we have them do a documentary, a 3-hour one nonetheless, of real people that's not scripted, that's literally compiled and edited together from all these interviews and just B-roll footage of these kids playing basketball, the fact that they are so much more impressed by what some people would consider a less appreciated form of cinema and filmmaking, it's really weird to me that they are cheering this on so much on the exact same kind of cinematic aptitude that they judge narrative and scripted films by. I think there's a real interesting kind of hypocrisy there. I'm not mad at it, but the fact that like this is not beautiful filmmaking. It's a handheld video camera getting in there, getting in these people's faces, talking to them, but non-linear. Yet they are so much more appreciative of it, and it really is an interesting thing to kind of judge them as film critics when they are so highly praising a film like this, and then just being so kind of flippant about traditional filmmaking. What do you think about that?
I think that they from what I've seen of like their shows, they do tend to take documentaries and put them on like a higher level. Like a lot of their documentaries that they review, they kind of appreciate them a lot more, and so they will talk more highly about them.
Well, it's almost like they're different critics.
Yeah, it is, and so I don't necessarily think that they would have that take as being anything different with this one. It's interesting because, you know, this is a Chicago film,
and they're Chicago guys, yeah,
and they're Chicago guys. So you would think that they would maybe have a little bit of bias, but I think they understand that, you know, even though that these are Chicago guys and they're Chicago guys, they still understand that what this film is at its heart is great filmmaking. Yeah. And even though it doesn't have the budget, it doesn't have the whiz bang that, a big budget Hollywood film would have, they understand the work that was put into it and the time and the effort. And I think they appreciate that. And I think it goes a long way to why they hype it up as much as they do.
No, you got a good point there. And the fact that this is like regional for them, it's homegrown. I don't know. I'm not familiar with how big of basketball fans they are, but I'm assuming if you're from Chicago, you're a basketball fan. You're a basketball fan. You're a football fan. You're a baseball fan. Like, it's a sports city, and they are journalists. Regardless of what the form is, they are journalists, and they are looking at this more, I think, as journalism than they are actual filmmaking. And I think that's important to note because being a journalist, to me, is almost as difficult as being a filmmaker, maybe more difficult because you are stuck with the truth, right? Your whole job is to report the truth or facts. Truth and facts may not always be the same thing. So to be a documentarian, knowing that you kind of have to like fact check yourself and be as journalistic with your filmmaking as possible, I'm sure that the critics also appreciate that, even though there's more hyperbole in criticism than there is actual journalism. But I think that's another reason why they're looking at documentaries differently than they look at narrative and scripted things. Maybe documentaries aren't necessarily supposed to be entertaining. They're supposed to be more educational, but they'll be more educational if you can make them entertaining and engrossing. And I think that's what separates this particular one more than other documentaries I've seen or that they've reviewed. So I think my point that I'm trying to make is that because they are journalists at heart, critics are journalists, they're viewing this with their critic hats kind of put off to the side. They're using their journalistic integrity hats right now, and that's why they appreciate it so much. It's really, I think, easy for them to step outside the realm of film criticism because for them, they are watching more of a journalistic piece than they are a traditional narrative film. And that's why they're cheering it so much, because for them, it's almost like a breath of fresh air. It's a break from the monotony of watching a shitty movie every week.
I think it's part of that, but also if you remember Ebert's mention in his part of it is the fact that this is more like the real life is actually better than the narrative. Like it has like
True.
function and story, and the narrative telling of it makes a lot more sense and actually works a lot better than a lot of fiction films. And so I think that it's not just the journalist hat that they have on, but also the critic hat that they have on, because they know what a good film is. They know what a good film looks like. And so when they see it, regardless of whether it's a narrative film, a fiction film, or it's a documentary film, like they know what it is. And so I think that's really, they are almost excited and giddy the fact that they get to see a good movie. It just so happens to be a documentary, and it just so happens to be from Chicago. So it's like almost like a cherry on top for them to get to experience that.
Well, you're speaking my co-host language right now. Oddly, he's been silent this entire episode, or he's fresh from the road and just jumped in. We'll let the audience decide. Justin Henson, what do you think about their initial review of this?
You know, if it was just Gene Siskel, I would give credit where credit is due, that this is going to be a Chicago basketball journalistic critique. But, you know, when Roger goes and holds the torch for this movie, and I think he held the torch for this movie more than Gene did throughout the runtime. But, you know, this is something that I think really did tell a self story. It really did tell the growth of two youthful kids with a dream. But at the same time, it's one of those that is not that it doesn't follow the same tropes as a documentarian would. It does just allow the stories to kind of unravel by itself. So to me, I think they're within their right to kind of tell this story on the surface level of what this movie is really about. It is about life that doesn't necessarily turn out the way these two boys wanted, or it did, or it just followed the tropes of just going through adolescent life with wanting to be sports. I mean, this movie really did show us that it's not about basketball necessarily. That is the overhanging theme, but it really is about following a passion of what, I'm going to keep it really basic here, what makes us happy and what drives us and what distracts us from everyday life. Because with every good thing that happens to these boys, there's a negative, there's a hardship. And that's what really the biggest thing that I appreciated about this movie is it doesn't show all sunshine and rainbows. It doesn't have to really balance itself with good, bad, good, bad. There is a lot of aspects here that really does bring these boys down potentially to really have a loss of life. And it really doesn't follow that. There's always a hint of realism that happens with this movie. And I think that's what Gene and Roger really did appreciate this movie, is not about the actual sports aspect, not the Chicago aspect, is the realism of it.
And something that you guys both said about you would have more twists and turns in a scripted fictional version of this, but they wouldn't feel as genuine. They would feel structured because almost all Hollywood scripts follow a certain pattern. And what's brilliant about this movie is that there's no pattern recognition because it's real life and it's spontaneous. And our heroes are they're not perfect. They are very challenged in what their motivations are. They have big dreams, but are they putting the right kind of work in to meet those, right? Like they've got the skill, they've got the talent, but do they have the drive and the passion to get the grades? That's almost like the big conflict there. The villain of the movie is academia for the most part, right? Like these kids have natural talent, but in order to get seen and recognized and promoted, they have to put the academic work in. And then there's the you could say there's side villains, but in a way they're not. They're just doing what they do. I think at the end of the day, what we talked about before you joined us, Justin, is like in a sense, classism is the villain, opportunity is the villain. The fact that like these people that are there to help him, the coach, the scout, the people that are there like telling him what to do, both of them what to do. Are they in it for the kids' best interest or are they in it for their own best interests? The fact that, they won't release Arthur's transcripts because they owe like $1,800 and that's holding him back. That is a villainous trait. That is a conflict in the second act, but it's not scripted. It's just naturally there. So it's those kind of things that Gene and Roger hit it right on the nail on the head. You can't script that, but it feels like something that was just geniusly scripted.
Well, I think when we get to the parents, especially when they go into the financial institution, there is something that does feel scripted to an extent because it feels like a stress that should have been amplified. But again, it's a documentary. You have a camera in your face. There is going to be a little bit of artificialness to it. But at the end of the day, I think what the realism is that it comes from our boys, because as we get to the end of the movie, as we have our coach, and I think it's with Arthur, reach out saying, I hope you do good down the road. I hope you do great down the road. And, I think there's an aspect where Arthur just is silent. He doesn't say anything like a normal teenager would. We expect a teenager in any other sports movie to be motivated to come back with something else motivational to the table, but he doesn't. He just kind of just stays silent and leaves the room. And the coach just says, one out the door, one coming back in. So it really is real when it comes to following these boys on what the intent is. So, and that's what I appreciated about it. It doesn't have to be scripted. With the adult characters, yeah, we do feel a little force here and there, but I think that's part of the beauty of it is these parents almost take the stresses and bury it deep down because they know it's a camera in their face. They know they're having hardships, but at the end of the day, they're having hardships every single day. So we ask ourselves the question, is it the camera in their face or is it here's something else that we have to overcome? It's almost like the normality of their lives is crap. Now what? So I think there is a balance between the two of normality versus a documentary or a camera trying to capture these moments. So it didn't throw me off as much. And it's almost like during my second viewing, I appreciated it even more.
I was going to say, I think for me, like in this latest rewatch that I did, I really appreciated Arthur's mom so much more. I think way back in the 90s when I saw this film for the first time, I was really focused on William and Arthur because, that's why I was that age of a teenager into basketball and everything. But in this latest rewatch, seeing the mom and the struggles that she went through with, the father running out, getting into drugs, getting in jail. And like she had to really stabilize that family. And she was able to, work through all of that and become really that stabilizing force to kind of help Arthur keep on that path of getting into college. And the one scene that really stood out was the scene with her and the coach. And, she's talking to him about like making sure that, Arthur was on the ball as far as like his academics so that he would be eligible to be able to go to college. Those scenes really kind of stood out to me because she was that guiding force when there was a lot of instability that could have really derailed Arthur. And the same goes for William in that he had everything kind of handed to him almost, because he had a lot more talent on the front end, whereas Arthur really kind of had it more his junior and senior years. But even with William, like he really struggled with the injury, and that kind of hampered him a lot of like how is he gonna really compete and be at his best. It and the coach there at St. Joseph's, he was kind of like that villain. If you wanted to say there was like a secondary villain, it
Yeah,
was
yeah,
kind of him.
I agree.
But even he had his moments where he cared about William and wanting to make sure that he got his grades up so that he could go to college. And so I think the adult characters, as an adult, you watch this film, it they really kind of stand out a lot more than just the basketball players. Even though the basketball players are kind of what bring you to the dance, I think the adult characters and the siblings kind of really galvanize what makes this film great.
Arthur's mom is a hero, 100% in my opinion. In fact, I almost think it's her movie. And my favorite scene of the movie is when she finally gets her RN, essentially, like she gets the nursing thing, and everyone gets a celebration and a party, but for her, she's like right back to work, right? Like it's that sacrifice of a mom that, again, I'd never seen this movie before, but that's what resonated the most for me. And yes, I would say like just St. Joe's in general as the villain, the fact that they use Isaiah Thomas as like this lure, this bait to come to St. Joe's and become the best basketball player, but we don't hear about any other success stories other than Isaiah Thomas. So it's almost like it's a predatory institution of getting talent in there and using him as the bait and the lure. And then you see how that coach and the financial institution behind it just chasing the tuition. I'm like, oh, this is like it's like a credit bureau trying to get you to get another credit card. It really is there just to like exploit these people. And yes, I get it. It changes a lot of people's lives for the good, but at the same time, I'm a pessimist. I just saw the bad side of it.
Well, you have to remember too, and especially in that first act of the film, Arthur really didn't stand out as far as a basketball player. He was on the freshman team and he really didn't break out. And so whenever the coach at the public school is talking and talks about when he has to transfer, he says, if he was really good, they would have made a way for him to make it.
Right.
Because we see it with William, the Encyclopedia Britannica lady. She's the one that essentially sponsors him to be able to pay his way for the scholarship, and even got him a job, a summer job, 1 year. So they made sure that he got that 4 years. And Arthur, because he didn't blossom initially, he was the one that kind of got lost in the cracks. But because he was so talented later on, that's why we got the success story of him being able to make it all the way to the state finals.
Can I just go on defense really quick with the villainous of the villains of this movie? Is I don't think there is a real villain on a character study. This one is a villain of the system. This one is where we have financial basis. We have the power being shut off. I don't think any character here has ill will. I think, one, they have jobs to do. And at the same time, we do see a crescendo from the coaches where we see a harshness of tough life. And I'm going to age myself of the 80s, I'm sure. And Antonio, you can join me if you'd like. But it's one of those that we have that tough love. And we see prime examples throughout this movie of discipline. We have the coach saying, remember when I made you run those 40 steps or whatever it is? You're going to thank me later. So I think by the end of the movie, we do have some rhyme and reason to what the adults do to these kids. There's nobody really scandalous trying to say, I'm going to get you by the end of this. We don't have anybody that really has the intent of doing bad. And I am going to sound super privileged right now, but the moment that stuck with me was when we have Arthur's birthday and we have the cake and Arthur's mom is pouring that 80s frosting that nobody likes on the cake. And she says, this is my son's favorite cake. Nobody in their fucking right mind loves that frosting that's ever tried it. But Arthur takes a lick of the cake. And you know what? That's what stuck with me is the small things, not the big things, the small things in this is that it's more about the event. It's more about the moments that these characters have that all unite to celebrate something. And Antonio, you talked about her becoming an RN, and that is so simplistically shot. And you're absolutely right. Is she doesn't get a reward. It is a single shot of her getting dressed in a nurse's outfit with nobody behind her. I think it's a beautiful scene, beautiful shot. But we also relate that to the birthday where we do have people celebrating Arthur. Who is the star of this movie? Of course, it's going to be the two boys, but the two prominent moments, and you stole it, Antonio, is the RN moment, and it's going to be the licking of the disgusting frosting that I absolutely hate because it's the simplistic things that matter in these lives. And we forget that in documentaries today is, you know what? It doesn't take a beautiful shot to become memorable. It doesn't take a beautiful moment to be memorable. It's the simplistic things that you don't realize can be bigger things. And to give a snapshot of this 3-hour movie, my biggest takeaways is the mom graduating for this RN school and the gross chocolate cake.
I tell you what, though, she is kind of brilliant. The fact that she was dredging the fried chicken in a plastic grocery bag so she doesn't have to do dishes later. I'm stealing that. I bread stuff all the time at home. I'm like, oh, I'm totally going to do it in a plastic bag from now on. That makes a lot of sense. All right, let's continue with the second review, which was later in the year. They actually did it again in their best of, but we already covered that in a different podcast. So we're going to go ahead and play their next one.
And you may remember that we first talked about this movie way last January on this show. We saw a special preview here in Chicago before it went on to conquer every film festival, Sundance, Toronto, New York. And we reviewed it early because we wanted to say how good it was, call attention to it.
The reason we wanted to call attention to it is we were hoping it would get a theatrical release, which it is now getting nationwide.
Hoop Dreams is a great film, and you owe it to yourself to see it.
Oh, I think it's wonderful, as we've talked about earlier this year. And what I love is, and we must remember the filmmakers who had this idea. And I love when filmmakers have the courage to say, you know what? We're going to spend a whole bunch of time tracking people's lives. Here we're following kids for 6 years, and of course their lives are full of drama.
What's remarkable, they started out to make a 30-minute documentary about these 8th graders, and they realized, no, we're stuck with these guys for the long run, and they made 250 hours of film about these two kids, and the result of that is they have all of these incredibly dramatic moments, and there are twists in this story that if they were in a fiction film, you'd say, that's too incredible. It's an exhilarating experience.
And the bottom line is that you want, when I saw this picture and we take them up to college first year.
Yes, we do.
I had one thought, and people are going to have the same thought. I wonder how they're playing now. I wonder what they're doing now.
And you know what I found out? They're both still in college.
So I think one of the things I have to say about this is this is a refreshing episode. It's a palate cleanser for me, because Justin and I have not seen Roger and Jean be this excited about anything in a while. And that's the part where I'm just like, wow, they got this excited over a documentary, but I have not honestly seen them this excited about an actual film in the 2 seasons that we've done this. This is the most excited and most complimentary I've seen them about any movie. And it's a 3-hour basketball documentary. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think the fact that they were so hyped about this film, I think it is it's a joy to see them talk about it. They champion it. Like, they would go on numerous times throughout their show and say, this film deserves all the praise. This film deserves all the credit. And, they even got into it with the Academy because of the fact that the Academy was just so dumb in not nominating and giving the award for best documentary to this film, because they felt that it deserved it. And the fact that they championed this film as much as they did, I thought was refreshing and unique for them, because they're not ones to champion a film as much as they did with this one. Because I can't think of another film where they were so gung-ho about it over multiple episodes. It's not just one episode. There were 4 or 5 episodes where they were like, this is a film you need to see. This is a film that needs to be recognized. this is a film that deserves all the praise and credit that it should get.
Well, I think they really did champion this film, especially when it comes to awards time, because they did squeeze a best editing nomination. Bullshit, by the way, that's laziness. Out of this movie, which it should have been nominated for best documentary, because it was, when it stands to the rest of them, was one of the better ones. So this one shocks me with the amount of time, effort, and realism this movie has, is that they didn't get nominated. And it baffles me that this got best editing. Out of all the movies that year, this got best editing, which actually pisses me off a little bit. I'm about to go on a rant, but I'm not. But at the same time, I think it is deserved. When it comes to a documentary about pure intent of what the outcome is going to be, what your messaging is going to be, and this one doesn't want to tell a miracle story. It wants to tell the story of boys. It put in the effort, it put in the filmmaking, it put in the time to tell a story, to not necessarily motivate, but to tell a story of just real life and how hard it is to go against the system to be successful. And basketball is the mere driver to really have that happy moment, to really have to tell a tale of find something that makes you happy, and that leads to success.
I think with my final little thought on this whole thing is, this might be a hyperbolic idea. I really think that, like, when documentaries come out and they make a splash, it's usually about a very recent and relevant subject. It makes a splash. It hits all of the hot topic points that people are talking about, either on social media or in the actual media. And then after, let's say, the joy and cheer for that documentary, whether it wins an Oscar or whatever, after that kind of like dies down, that documentary fizzles into almost non-existence, right? There's very few documentaries that I say have withheld the test of time. I'd say Grey Gardens is probably the one that people talk about to this day, and that movie is like 60 years old. Then this one, people are always discovering it, like myself. Like, I knew what it was, I just never went into it because it's basketball. But I mean, this one gets multiple re-releases on physical media. It gets recognition on streaming. People discover it. Getting on Letterboxd and seeing how many 5-star reviews. This is one of those rare documentaries that has staying power in the zeitgeist. It's not like the Michael Moore movies that make a splash because they're, very hot topic of the moment, and then end up in the bargain bin because people are over it. They got enough going in their lives. They don't care about 9/11 anymore. They don't care about Columbine anymore. Like, it's almost like shock journalism, those documentaries. But this one tells a story. It's borderline cinematic because it feels like you are watching a scripted movie, but you're not. It's a documentary. So I think that is the difference between this and other documentaries that have made splashes at the Oscars and splashes in the zeitgeist, but then fizzle to non-existence. And the fact that Siskel and Ebert really jumped out of their critics' coats to praise this movie, I think that's like the icing on the cake. That is like the exclamation point on that idea, is that this is a documentary that can withstand the test of time.
And I think, too, the fact that they rate this film as high as they did, like at the end of 94, right, this was both their number one film. Right. Like, they had it above Pulp Fiction. Like, they said, this is the number one film. And even at the end of the decade, Ebert had Hoop Dreams, the number one film of the entire 90s. It's like that stuck with him so much that even with all the films that come out in the 90s, he still had Hoop Dreams as the number one film because it really resonated with him and stuck with him. And I think for both of them, they really just enjoyed it and they appreciated it for what it was, not just as a documentary, but as a film.
I don't know if I'd agree with Roger on the best film of the decade, but here's kind of the deal: is this is where it gets really, really hard for critics, especially Roger and Gene. Is you, and I've said it on my show millions of times, is you have to base on the way the film was made versus entertainment value, or did it hit you emotionally? And this one, you can tell, is a rare moment in their entire career that both of them, this hit them emotionally. And this is a movie that could have divided them almost. they can appreciate the filmmaking aspect of it. But you have, again, like I said before, you have Gene, that's a huge basketball fan. You have Roger, that's not per se, but they do appreciate an emotional level in a basketball. This is almost a movie made for them to balance each other, to really say, I love the basketball, I love the emotion, I love the life story. And it was a movie made for Siskel and Ebert. So, but that's not to say that it wasn't made for audiences, because this is a movie that should relate to everybody. Because I'm not an athletic guy, I'm not a basketball guy. I was a cheerleader in high school and I clapped when everybody else clapped. So that's how diverse I am when it comes to watching sports. But I was engulfed by the hardships. I was engulfed by the characters, the normality of life itself. That's what brought me into this. And I think on an entertainment level, it's not really there. On an emotional level, 110%.
All right, so let's go ahead and give our ratings to these critics. I mean, it's kind of hard. I can't see us giving negative reviews to the movie or to their critiques. So my critic, Gene, I can't tell who likes this movie more, him or Roger, but I am just so happy to see him happy. It's like, when mom's always crying and just seeing her face light up a little bit will make your day, make your life. That's how I feel about Gene. I'm like, good, someone made him smile, finally. And so with that, I got to give him an A, because this is the brightest I've seen him in the 2 years that we've done this podcast.
For me, it's the same thing. I can almost visualize Roger walking out of the theater, dribbling a basketball, having a trip on his foot, but still smiling. And, it's amazing that he was almost more excited than Gene was with this movie. And he's not a sports guy. So I think this one is a solid 4 stars for Roger, because he was able to articulate the special parts of the movie. He was able to articulate and rally this movie that went against the current Hollywood movies. And again, during that year, there was a lot, and especially during the Academy, that I'll just name drop right away, is they gave the best editing because they just wanted the movie included, the bastards. But this is, I think, Roger's big moment of, I can see beyond the symbolic themes of basketball to realize real life. And I think that's the reason he picked this documentarian to shoot his last movie of life itself.
Oh, I did not know that. That's very interesting. Well, Michael, that's our rating systems. If you've got one of your own, please jump in, or feel free to use whatever rating system you like. But what are your thoughts about, let's say, the critics' review together?
I would say it's 5 out of 5. I think the fact that not only do they describe, what made the film work, but their appreciation of it, and the fact that they were able to let others know, they should go see this movie. Particularly in the first review in January, they talked about The Air Up There, which I don't know if you two have seen that film. It's the Kevin Bacon film.
Oh,
it's
yes.
it's not very good. But the fact that Roger was like, kids will like Hoop Dreams probably a lot more than The Air Up There. And he's not wrong, because the Hoop Dreams is just a real, engaging film that has these people that, you may not know their names. They're not household names going into seeing the film, but coming out of the film, you feel like you know them. And so I think that really is a testament to the filmmaking. It's a testament to the director, Steve James. And I think Roger and Gene got the assignment in knowing, what this film is, and was able to communicate it. And I think the fact that they championed the film as much as they did let people around the country know about this film so that they could see it and appreciate it. Even all these years later, people are seeing it for the first time like y'all and appreciating it and enjoying it. So definitely the film and the reviews and their championing of the film, 5 out of 5 for me.
Well said. Okay, so before we go, let's get your plugs, sir. Talk about your podcast, where people can find you, and what it's all about.
Yeah, so I have the Screen Nerds podcast. It's a podcast for film lovers by film lovers. It's a review podcast where right out of the theater do quick thoughts of new releases or rescreen episodes where it's reviewing favorite films and sharing thoughts and feelings about seeing that rewatch. And you can listen to those wherever you get your podcast. Just search out Screen Nerds Podcast. And then if you want to hit me up on the socials, it's at Screen Nerds Pod on Twitter and on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at Screen Nerds Podcast.
Excellent. I got to give a quick shout out to the Vintage Video Podcast crew. It's in their Discord where we first met, and you were exposed to our show, and now you're part of the family. So big appreciation to Patrick and those guys to let you into our little world and just keeping it growing. It's been really great. All right, so everyone, thank you for watching, listening. Next week, you can tune into the show where Justin and I will be breaking away from our family-friendly movies and getting into some darker, more violent, more disgusting territory. I am bringing Wolfgang Petersen's Outbreak, starring Dustin Hoffman, Cuba Gooding Jr., Rene Russo, and a red-headed Kevin Spacey for some reason. So looking forward to that. You can find me, Antonio, over at the Cult Worthy Cinema Podcast at thecultworthy.com. You can find my co-host Justin Henson over at
themoviewire.com.
Gentlemen, this was a blast, and we'll have you back, man. We'll see you soon.
Thanks for having me on.